Good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Jeffrey Potvin from the Open People Network, or OPN.Ninja. And today we're at the Up series, and we had a great talk by Gary from Global Emission Systems. And I think, Gary, you brought a lot of really interesting elements around sales. And I think I wanted to highlight kind of a couple of things that you mentioned and kind of get your take on what do you think would be the best message you want to leave with everybody that came out today around sales. And I think one of the things that touched me was you're always selling. You're always on the game. You got to be coaching. You got to be listening. I think he's called the 95-5 rule. So all of these things that you shared today, what do you think is the best thing that someone should take away if they're getting into sales, they're new, or someone that's been in sales for 20 years?
Well, I think the biggest, the biggest misconception that salespeople have is they think they've got to talk a lot in order to make a sale. And my opening slide was the 95-5. And that 95-5 rule means you're listening 95% of the time and talking 5% of the time. And the reason being is if you don't understand your customer's business, what their issues and challenges are, or what their business objectives and strategies are, you will never be able to position the product or the service that you're trying to sell and the value that it's going to provide to them. If you're doing all the talking, you're just selling a product. So you are effectively pushing yourself into a commodity environment. And if you want to sell in a commodity environment, you're going to have a tough go of it, let me tell you, because you're not going to be selling a lot. And if you are, you're going to be selling at a low price. And what we say all the time is, if you're selling value, you'll be able to sell a lot more because your customers will see value not only in you as a resource to their company, but in terms of the product and or service you're selling, but also how it's going to be able to help them achieve their business objectives, whether it's growing sales, growing market share, getting better customer satisfaction, or addressing business issues or challenges like we're losing too much to our competitors, or the market's not accepting our product. So you have to do more listening than talking.
Well, that's amazing. And I think that I could sit here all day and listen to everything you got to say, because this is some good information. And I do agree the 95-5 rule is very important, and I'm glad that we were able to hear that from you today. What's in store for you guys in your global missions business in 2018?
Well, we've been very successful in the North American marketplace. Virtually, I'd say 95% of what we sell today gets exported into the U.S. And over the last 18 months, we've been doing business development over in Asia, so targeting India and China, and to a lesser degree in South America and Latin America, because those geographies and jurisdictions are trying to catch up to North American, European emission standards. And so we've got a lot of traction in India right now. In fact, we're just on the cusp of closing our first big deal. We just got a commitment from the customer. And we have been doing this all via Skype, through the internet, on the telephone and conference calls. But in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be traveling over to India to go visit with a lot of the customers that we've been talking about, and solidifying the closing of our first deal over there. So huge opportunity there. We've also introduced some new products into the North American marketplace, which we just launched. And we've already got commitments for in excess of $1 million worth of that product. And we're going to roll out a couple distributors in the U.S. So lots of upside. This is a great market to be in.
Wow, sounds very busy. Well, I think we're all here. We're very excited and appreciative of all of your time. So everybody, you have to go online, check it out. The video is awesome. There's going to be a lot of great insights on sales. So thank you for joining us. You can get all your information at opn.ninja. And on behalf of Upsales, BCAD, Vitalize, we thank you, and the town of Whitby, we thank you guys. And Gary, thank you for coming.
Thank you, JP.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. Happy New Year one last time.
Great, thank you.
My name is Teresa Shaver. I'm the Executive Director for the Business Advisory Center Durham, and we're very happy to welcome you here to our first Up Sales event for 2018. I'd like to thank our partners, because without our partners, we could not make this happen. JP, thank you very much for is it live casting or are you recording?
Just recording.
Okay. So OPN, Open People Network, and yeah, so please send that link out to people. We'll send it out to you, and also the town of Whitby for sponsoring our coffee and sponsoring the location. Thank you. And then we also have Frank from Vitalize. So Frank has been.
Hello. Nobody wants to sit with me. What the hell's going on?
He's chased everybody away. It's the energy, Frank. They can feel it. So we started a year ago with this series, and we started with myself and Frank having a lunch together going, there's nothing really out in Durham region for people who just want to learn about sales or connect with each other around sales and business development, and it's something that most of our businesses struggle with. And struggle as in, how do I stay on the bicycle? How do I keep making sales all the time, every day, for the rest of my business life? So, we decided that it would be a great idea to bring out people who can share their knowledge about what they did in sales, and it's more candid and more casual than being in an environment where you feel that you're just being talked to. So today our speaker is someone I know quite well. He hired me at BACD 5 years ago, and I've known Gary before when I was at the Whitby Chamber of Commerce. I cold called the company he was working from. At the time, I think he was Vice President of Sales, right? So he has a long history in sales. He started out in IBM, learning the tenets of management consultancy and business, and then was running Sharp Canada, and again was in sales, and a couple of tech startups, and now the company's no longer a startup, but they're a hydrogen energy catalytic converter, correct? Something like that. Clean tech company sounds easier. So I'm responsible for sales all across Europe and North America. So he's going to share a little bit of his background with you. And I've learned so much from him. I'm so thankful he's my mentor and that I'm able to learn about business and sales and just, how to be good at what I do. So Gary, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Teresa. And you got to wonder when she says, I know him really well, and then she starts fumbling about the company I work for. But anyway, it is a technology company, but it's a great technology company. We're really excited to be running it. So thanks for having me today, and thanks to all the sponsors. And, I know you've probably been inundated with slides probably over the last number of months, anybody who's been at these before. So I thought today what I'd do is go minimal on the slides and go more on the interactive. So ask me questions, let me tell you stories, and share my experiences that I've had through my professional sales career. And I call it a professional sales career because if you are a true salesperson, regardless of your job, you will always be selling, and you will always have that 30-second elevator pitch I'm sure you've heard of a million times, but you will always be selling. So now, Teresa, how am I flicking the slides over? Because I just didn't, can I just go over to your machine or will this work? So I was pretty fortunate in my professional career. Right out of university, I got hired by IBM. And IBM, great company, I know you all know about it, but it truly is an economy within a company. It's the kind of organization that you can join and you can literally have 17 or 20 different careers and never leave the company. But what's most important about IBM and what I got out of working for IBM was truly a professional, highly professional sales organization. Like they had selling down to a science such that, and many of you probably gone through similar kind of programs, literally when you started at IBM, the first thing you did if you were in sales and marketing is you went to basic sales training, BST. And they actually used to have a campus down in the United States, but then they brought it up into Canada. We were the first cohort going through the Canadian organization. But you literally spent a year going through training. It was like an internship that you would do at school. You'd come in, you'd be in the office for a couple months, and then you'd go off to training for 2 to 3 months. Then you'd come back and you'd work in the office, have to apply a lot of the things that you did, and then you'd go back into training again. So really good at doing that. And I look back on my professional career and I would say, At IBM, you get an MBA in the IT industry. It was an excellent company to work for. But the company changed, and I ended up getting recruited out to go work for Xerox. And I worked for Xerox for, I don't know, a handful of years. And there is another phenomenally great company, truly excellent at sales. And any of you, how many people here ever worked for Xerox? Yeah, so a lot of people know about the Xerox course. A lot of people work for Xerox. Like usually every crowd you go into, you always find an IBM or a Xerox, alumni. Phenomenal company, the best at selling. Like they were just relentless. Everybody in the organization, right down to the top executives, which really impressed me, sold. The difference between IBM and the difference between Xerox in terms of the organizations, like I said, at IBM, you got an MBA in the IT industry. At Xerox, you learned operational excellence. They were like unbelievable from an operational standpoint. Quality, sales process, monitoring, forecasting, sales meetings, finances, you name it, they were phenomenal at doing that. And so I'm just going to step through a little bit of my career, and then we'll start talking about what makes great salespeople and what makes pedestrian salespeople. From Xerox, I got recruited back in the internet boom, like late 90s, into a software startup based out of San Diego, California. Great company, great technology, and it was a point in time where a lot of entrepreneurs would love to be back into, but with a great idea, you could raise a phenomenal amount of money. And we probably raised over 3 rounds of financing, about 75 million US. Kleiner Perkins was one of the key investors, and if any of you are entrepreneurs or in the IT industry or in the venture capital, Kleiner Perkins was like the #1 IT VC down the US. They made major investments, huge amounts of money. But again, like many companies in that whole time frame, a lot of the business model was based on internet-based companies, not bricks and mortar. And then when the requirement was to, hey, we got to figure out how to move these to bricks and mortars companies because things are changing, all of a sudden the whole market died. And how many people were invested in the IT marketplace in the late 90s? I was, and I can tell you I lost a ton of money. But yeah, a lot of those companies disappeared, as did ours. Actually, didn't really disappear, they just closed. They went from literally one office in San Diego. They went to 17 offices and 450 employees in less than a year. I ran the Canadian operations, and literally come late 2000, we went down to one office and about 17 employees. It was an unbelievable change. And then I had an interesting shift to go work for Sharp Electronics, so a Japanese-based company. I ran the Canadian operations under a Japanese president who was an expat. And I'll tell you what was interesting about that role was learning the Japanese business model, completely different than North American business models. And what I was able to learn out of there really helped me crystallize some of the follow-on startups that I was into. And then I went into a couple of other technology startups. One was in mobile power technology. One was in service technology, which back then was phenomenal technology, but you would think of it as like, yeah, that's basic. But basically what we did was, you had a service tech would go out and do all their service calls, and they'd write everything on paper, and they'd send all the paperwork back to the office, order parts, do everything. Well, basically we took a handheld computer and we automated all of that. Basic stuff today, but back then it was absolutely groundbreaking, and we did phenomenal business in there. And then I decided to get into the clean tech business. So back around 2008, I was working for a private equity firm who had hired me to run a company and basically shine it up and sell it. Did that, had a year off that they had to pay me out, and I got connected into this clean tech startup. So why did I get into this clean tech startup? Because I was always in the information, communication, telecom business, right? The ICT sector is what they refer to it. You were always selling something to organizations that they didn't know that they needed, but that could help their business. And that's exactly what we do in our clean tech business. We are selling them a technology. In a lot of cases, they don't even know exists, but we're selling it to them because it will help their business. And obviously, it has a lot of other benefits down the road, too. So let's start talking about sales. And hopefully, I'm going to go on the right way. So rule number 1, You know, everybody says, oh yeah, that guy can talk a mile a minute. He's best. He could sell ice cubes to an Eskimo. He's a great salesperson. How many people here are in direct sales? How many here are sales managers? How many here would be sales executives, like sales VPs or exec VPs? How many people here are in business development? How many people here are in administration? And then there's some other people who are in neither of them. Okay, so for salespeople, the rule in front of customers is 95-5. Anybody know what 95-5 stands for? 95% listening, 5% talking. And let me give you a great example of that. You go into a customer's office, there's two things that you can do. You can ask a couple of very intelligent, open-ended questions, and then have that customer talk to you for a whole lot of time. You're going to learn a lot about that customer and their business. Or you can try to figure out how to talk ad nauseum on topics that you think they're going to be interested in, and more than likely you won't be. So it's a lot easier to be a good listener than it is to be a good talker. And that's where you start getting into this value-based over commodity. So we used to tell our salespeople, and I do that all the time, I just did it here now. I now have a better understanding of who my audience is. But even to this very day, I go in as a vice president of global mission systems. We go in, we're meeting with the executive of an organization to give them our standard, here's our company pitch, who we are, what we do, and why we do it. The first thing I ask, I go, look, here's, we got this presentation, we're going to take you through, this is what it's going to do. But before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about your business? Even though I've done all kinds of research on the net, and everybody thinks, if I go to the internet and I look and I can probably find out everything I need to know about the company, let me tell you, you're just skimming the surface, because no company tells you everything about their company on the internet. Why would they? They're going to tell you all the good stuff, the things that their customers want to know, but they're not going to tell you what their business issues are. And that's how you learn about the customers. You got to ask intelligent, open-ended questions. Open-ended questions. So I don't want a yes or no answer. That's a closed-ended question. I want to just ask them questions to learn about their business, because as you learn about their business, then you can very easily and very quickly figure out how I can align my message out of my presentation to their company and the issues that they're running into on a day-to-day basis. So I do that every time. Every time we do a pitch, tell me a little bit about your business. As soon as I hear them talking about their business, let me tell you, everybody in a company loves to talk about their company. And as you move down from the CEO down to the mailroom person, it kind of gets less invigorating. But when you talk to the CEO of a company or any of the executive team of a company, they love talking about their company. They love telling you what they've been able to achieve, but they're very open about telling you where their problems are. And when you can understand where their business problems are, that's where you can then start to add value by understanding their business, because you're asking good questions, you're learning about the customer, and then you can relate how your technology, your service, or your product is going to be able to solve some of their business problems, help grow their business, help achieve some of their business objectives. So you have to figure out where you're going to be able to position yourself. How many people here sell software? Nobody, eh? I'm surprised. Well, one. How many people are selling products? Couple. How many people are selling services? Lots of services. Wow, I'm surprised. Usually there's a little bit more of a balance between products and software versus services. But even in the services business, you can't go and try and tell a customer, here's what we do and this is why you need us, until you understand about their company. Does that make sense? I mean, that 95-5 rule, 100%, you gotta live to that all the time. Here's another interesting thing. If you're gonna go into a customer office, an executive, senior executive, senior management person, start asking questions about their business, what do you need to do to demonstrate that you're listening? Like, please do not go in there and ask all these great questions and then just sit there listening, okay? Please have a book, have a pad, have a scrap of paper, do whatever you want, but you gotta take notes. Anybody who knows me in business, they'll see me walking around with this black book all the time. I get one every year, and if you come into my office, you'll see every one of them from 2008 until today, and at the end of the year, I basically write the year on the edge, and I can go back and I can look up notes. Because I can tell you, there's nothing worse than me sharing all this information about my company, and I see you sitting across my desk, and the first thing I'm going to think about when you leave is, how much is that guy going to remember? Like, think about it. Think of all the information we're bombarded with on a day-to-day basis. Like, we all know we're dependent on our smartphones because we go, I know that guy. What company was he with? I know that lady. What company was she with? You start looking on your smartphone and you can figure it out. You got to take, I can remember once when I was at IBM, it was 1984. I just started. I think I was there I'd gone through maybe the first module of sales training. And so I'd been there maybe 5 months. My manager came up to me, Gary, we're going to put you on a special project. You're going to go work with Bill Etherington. He was our vice president of operations. So I go over to Moatfield, which is where all the executives were, and go meet with Bill Etherington. And like, when you work for a company like IBM, you go meet one of the senior executives. It's like meeting the Pope. It's like meeting Justin Trudeau. It's like meeting the president, a good president of a company, of a country, right? But so I go to his office. Of course, I get there a little bit early because you never want to be late. And his assistant's there, and have a seat, Gary. Great. And she goes, okay, Bill will see you now. She opens the door. I go into his office, and he says, okay, Gary, here's this project we're going to work on. I'm sitting on the board of the United Way, and I have responsibility for this area, and I need you to help me out. It'll be a great development opportunity for you. You're going to be able to learn to deal with executives. You're going to be able to do presentations. So it's going to be a great thing for you. So here's what I need you to do. So he starts going through, and he's telling me all these things, and I go, okay, yep, okay, going to do that, yep, okay, you're going to do that, yep. And he opens his desk, he takes out a pad, he pushes it over the desk, he gets a pencil, he pushes it over, he goes, Gary, please take some notes. And I said, okay, great. So I start taking some notes, and he goes, and by the way, don't ever come to a meeting again without bringing a pad and a pen or a pencil to take notes. And I can tell you, I never, ever forgot that lesson. And I'll tell you, there's nothing worse than going into an executive's office, having a long discussion with them and walking out. I will tell you, if you didn't take a note, they've already written you off. You're already losing credibility with that executive. I have this notebook. I do it for phone calls and everything, because you know what, as I get older, I only have so much read-only memory up here. And as I get into, I meet new people and I get into new organizations, information starts flowing out the top as new stuff comes in the bottom. And so I just start forgetting things. So when I write things down, it's great. And you know what, the other interesting thing about it is I can then go into follow-up meetings, because when you're in a sales cycle, it's never a one-call close. How many people have done a one-call close? Nobody, exactly. So you're gonna see your customer more than once. When I take notes, and I have my book with me, a lot of times I'm going to refer back to them, and I'm going to say, yeah, that was an interesting comment, John. Last time we spoke, you mentioned that blah, blah, blah. My credibility just goes right through the roof, because he knows, one, I was listening, two, that I took notes, and three, that I'm smart enough to refer back to my notes. So listen, you don't have to do what I'm doing. I carry around this book. It's $7 at Staples. But I'll tell you need to have something to prove to them that you're listening, because if you don't, you just simply can't remember everything. We're bombarded with information. So what else can I tell you about the 95-5 rule? The other thing is, people love talking, whether it's about themselves or whether it's about their business. And it's important for you to not only understand the customer's business, but you got to understand that person. What's driving them? What are they interested in? What do they want to do? What's their direction they want to head in their organizations? What's their aspirations? Are they just going to stay in that job? Are they going to want to be the president? Or are they going to think of leaving that company? Because really, when you get into an organization, if you have a single point of contact, you're probably leaving yourself on a little bit of a gangplank with not a lot of sideways movement to be able to go. So you always want to have more than one contact in a company. At IBM, they always tell you, sell high and wide, and that's what we used to do. So we knew if we were going to sell something at IBM, we had to have the executives on board, but we need to have the operational people on board. You need to treat them with the equal level of respect and importance, because a lot of times, like I know when I ran a lot of organizations, people would come to me and they'd say, hey, we've had a couple of, proposals in for this new technology. What do you think? And I'd go back to people and I'd say, well, what do you think? Like, You make the decision. I'm not going to make the decision. I'm not always that close into it. So you have to remember, sometimes even though the CFO is the guy who's got to write the check and the president's going to be the guy who signs the contract, the person who actually makes the decision may be the person on the floor. So you got to do that high and wide thing. Otherwise, you're going to lose. And besides, the other thing about it is, how many people have left companies on short notice? Change careers. Yeah, everybody does. I've done it myself. So you don't want to be locked into one person and then potentially they leave the organization. Guess what? You're out of there. You don't have anybody else. You're starting all over again. So you got to build that network in your organization. Make sure you have a nice kind of broad profile, top to bottom. Who are all the people that are going to be involved in the decision? And think about who's going to be involved in the decision. Understand how that customer is making their buying decisions. Is it autocratic or is it democratic? Do they have a committee that looks at it? Is it the president who only makes a decision? It's typically never one person, although I've seen in some situations where the top guy typically, or the top lady typically makes all the decisions, but most of the time they're looking for input from people all around the organization. So now, information. Information's important. But having the right information at the right time is even more important. So I remember going through sales training, and you always do different kind of sales training all along through your career, and there's all kinds of different styles of sales training. I mean, I've probably been in my professional career half a dozen different sales training courses, and I can tell you that out of all of them, and they were all great, but typically what happens is you go in, you spend 3 days in a sales training course, you go back to the office, the binder goes into your credenza or into your bookshelf, and you go back to selling the way that you sold. I tell you that out of all the sales training, the only sales training I ever remembered was a company out of the US that came in. We did training at IBM, and I then placed them into a whole bunch of other companies to do sales training. But they were an implementation methodology. They actually came in, they did the sales training, and then they said, you know what, over the next 6 months, we're going to work with your salespeople, and we're going to help them implement the sales model. So let me tell you, if any of you are in an organization that you got to bring in sales training, absolutely 100% make sure that it's an implementation methodology as opposed to sales training. Because if all it is just 3 days sales training, everybody gets all excited, 9 out of 10 times they go back to the office, they start selling the way they've always sold, and then you lose the value of that training. And that implementation methodology is the one that taught me about selling value in a commodity marketplace. Because the reality today is there's information everywhere. So whatever you're selling, your customers know as much about your market segment and what you're selling in terms of services, product, or software as you probably do. And they can make a lot of assumptions based on the information that's available on the internet. So it's very easy for you to fall into that commodity range, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of moments. But getting on to having the right information at the right time, I'm going to tell this story, and there's a few people in here who are just a little bit younger than me, so they'll probably remember this story, but some of the newer people probably don't. But I think it was 1967 Masters, and Sam Snead, who was a great golfer, was at Augusta playing with Bobby Cole. He was a young 23-year-old South African golfer, really, really good golfer. And they were on the 13th hole. It was a little bit of a dog leg to the left. And they got up to the tee, and Sam said to Bobby Cole, he goes, when I was your age, I was able to knock the ball clear over those pine trees, and I'd just be a short chip shot into the green. I could easily birdie this hole. And so Bobby Cole kind of looked at it and he said, I'm bigger than Sam Snead. I'm stronger. The technology's better today than when he was my age. He said, I think I could do that. So steps up, tees up the ball, gets up there, gives it his best stroke ever, like everything he put into it. Hits a phenomenal shot. The golf ball goes soaring through. It just gets smothered in the pine trees, absolutely smothered in the pine trees. Doesn't even get anywhere close to going over the pine trees. He kind of stands there, he looks over at Sam and he goes, Sam, he goes, I can hit the ball longer than you. You've never hit the ball as far as me. The clubs I'm using are way better than you. He goes, how in the hell did you ever hit it over those pine trees? And Sam says, Bobby, when I was your age, those trees were only 20 feet tall. So, having information is one thing. Having the right information at the right time is clearly different. So make sure you always have the right information, because things change so fast in companies. The research you did a month ago could be out of date already. I just look at a lot of companies today and you see what's happening. And there's so much shift and change. Software companies, consolidation in different industries, banking industries, things changing, regulations changing. So strategies they could be on this path, and the next thing you know, they're on that path. So make sure you have the right information at the right time. Just because you did the research once and you learn about your company, make sure you check that research to make sure it's still valid, because if you don't have the right information, you could be selling up the wrong alley, and you don't want to do that. So let's move on from the 95-5 rule, and we're going to start talking about value and commodities. So information is key. Remember, you've got a product, you've got a service, you've got a technology. You're trying to convince your customer to buy. They know nothing about your technology, so you have to be able to articulate in terms that they're going to be able to understand what your technology or service is, or your product is, and how it's going to help their business. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is with the information that you get from that customer. Because once you learn about their business and how they're running it, and you'll then be able to tell them how your technology is going to add value. And you're going to know a lot more about their business. You're going to know their business goals, objectives, strategies. You're going to have your product. You're going to be able to articulate the features of it, what the benefit or how it's going to help meet some of their business objectives or overcome some of their business issues. And that's where you start to create value for that customer, because you are absolutely becoming basically a consultant to them. I look at every business that I've been in, and I look at myself as a student of learning. I'm not an engineer. I'm now in a clean technology company. We meet with engineering companies from some of the largest engine manufacturers in the world. We start talking about our technology. They go, "Oh, you must be an engineer." And I go, "No, actually, I'm not. I'm a sales guy." And they go, "Really? How do you know so much technology?" And I go, "Because when I get involved in a company and I'm involved in selling a product, I want to know everything about that technology. I want to know about how it's positioned in the marketplace, how it relates to other competitive offerings, what it does, everything about the market industry segment." I basically become a consultant in that industry. Today, if I wanted to, I could hang out a shingle and I could go consulting in the air and emissions business anywhere in North America, and probably in the next year anywhere in Europe, because we're starting to do business in Europe. So think of yourself that way. Become a consultant in your business for your customer, because if you position yourself that way, that's where you're starting to turn that information and the knowledge you learned about your customer into value. So you don't want to be in that situation where your customer just looks at you as a commodity and says, "Look, here's all the different services you're providing. I can get them from company A, B, and C. So you know what? Now we're just going to put it out to tender." A lot of stuff's changing in the marketplace. Think of how procurement organizations are. Anybody sell to large banks? Okay, it's lucky for you, because let me tell you, the large banks over the last probably 2 decades, all their procurement is all centralized. Doesn't matter what it is, it goes all through a centralized buying organization. Who did that? It was, I'm trying to think of the large consulting firm, but they basically had a practice, and they took that across all the large banks, all the large organizations. They said, "Look, you implement our methodology in terms of procurement, you're going to save millions and millions of dollars. You'll be able to get rid of people and everything." What that did for us as salespeople is make it a lot harder to sell value, because now you're dealing with procurement people. And so how do you give value to a procurement person what's their primary job in procurement? Yeah, save money, find the same product at a lesser price, figure out how to buy more of it at less dollars, see how I can beat up that vendor to get a better price on it. That's all that they do. But you can still be successful at selling in those procurement environments if you don't allow yourself to be pulled into it. So I'll give you an example. We're, like I told you, clean tech company. We sell emission controls. So Toronto Transit Commission, every night when the subways shut down, there's an army of workers that go into every subway station, every underground tunnel, and that's all they do is maintenance and repair. So they're cleaning the subway stations, they're replacing rails, they're fixing pins in the rails, they're doing whatever they need to do, electrical work and everything. Every piece of machinery that they use, because they're working in the tracks, is diesel-based. There's no electricity on the tracks anymore, because if there was, it would be too dangerous for the guys to work with. But think about it, they're working in tunnels, there's not a lot of ventilation, so all of a sudden you're running all this diesel equipment. Guess what? The World Health Organization classified diesel exhaust as carcinogenic to humans back in 2009. It's not a good thing. So we wanted to try and figure out how we could sell some of our technology to the TTC. So the first thing we did is we attended some of their executive town hall meetings. They're public because they're, a public organization, right? It's part of the city of Toronto. We went to some of their public meetings, and the first things that we heard was health and safety was extremely important from the executives. So that they had set up these health and safety committees, and they were looking at how to improve health and safety for all the employees. So that was a good thing to learn. So then we started calling on the TTC, and we had people who were into Andy Byford's group, and then we went into kind of the track infrastructure and maintenance infrastructure groups. We started talking to people. We met with some people. We got contacted through our networks. By the way, networking, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, massively important to do, because it was through our network that we were able to get into people. But the bottom line is what we ended up learning is that health and safety was critical. And right from Andy Byford, who used to be the past president of the TTC, he actually chaired their health and safety committee. They also were looking at Ministry of Health, new regs coming out of the Ministry of Health. So we did some research on there, and they were looking at reducing the time-weighted average and short-term exposure limits for certain hazardous air emissions. And so we put together a business case to them that said, we have technology that we could put on, retrofit onto all the existing equipment, so you don't have to replace your equipment. All we're going to do is add it onto your equipment, so that's going to save you money, so you don't have to replace your equipment. Number two is we're going to be able to improve health and safety these ways, because we're going to reduce all the diesel exhaust, the diesel particulate matter. That's in line with the fact that this has been classified as carcinogenic from the World Health Organization. And by the way, we're going to move you towards, if the Ministry of Health moves to their new regs, we're going to help you be in compliance with those new regulations. Not to mention, it's going to have a phenomenal impact on morale within the organization, because remember, the TTC is heavily unionized. Every time something happens and goes wrong, the employees get beat up in the public. So there's a morale issue at the TTC. So we put our business case together. We sent in our proposal. What did the first thing of our proposal do? A little bit about our company, a lot about the TTC and some of the issues that they were looking at, and then we gave them a proposal. We did a pilot. We closed $500,000 worth of business with them late last year. We just finished installing all of it. We'll probably get another $500,000 worth of business from them this year. And because of the way that we approach it, we're basically, and I use this in quotes, because they never sole source, but we are effectively sole source, because we position ourselves that we are the only company that can provide the technology that they're currently using in this environment. And so, in effect, what we've done is we've made ourselves sole sourced, even though they're not allowed to sole source. We're the only company that can provide that technology. And now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, great. Now we've got some credibility there. All the feedback has been phenomenally good. Now we're going into other parts of the TTC, and we're starting to do the same thing all over again, but we're using the contacts we have in the areas that we sold to connect us into the other areas. So it's very important. If you can position all that information and find out what's important to the organization, top to bottom, it is so important, and it makes your sales job so much easier. We go into the TTC now, we go into the Greenwood yard and the Davisville yard. The employees love us because they know we're taking away a health and safety issue for them. They don't smell the diesel exhaust, they don't see the diesel exhaust, they know it's safer for them, and they're happy about it. The executives are happy because we help meet a lot of their important objectives, business objectives. So always you got to think about it from that standpoint. How do you position yourself selling value? And the only way you can get value is you got to have the right information. So what's important to them? How's it important in their terms? Don't try and push it on your terms, because you're going to fail 100% of the time.
absolutely no way you're going to win trying to position on your way. So now, how many people here in selling their product have called a customer for the first time and started to go into a sales pitch with them? Don't be shy, but put up your hand. Sure, everybody has. I'm telling you, you're not putting up your hand. I know 100% of you did. So I'll give you an example why that's not good. And you'll always know, by the way, if the person you're talking to has ever been in sales, because they'll give you a little bit of help. But when I was at Xerox, I ran a number of large sales organizations there. And then our president put me into the CIO role. So here I am, a sales guy in a technology business, came from selling in a technology business. And the president says, Gary, I need you to be the CIO of the company. And I'm like, wow, Kevin, that's weird. Like, why would you want to put a sales guy in there? And the reason he wanted to put me in the CIO role was because I had a lot of support from the sales organization. I was running one of the largest sales organizations there, and we were having some big issues. Those issues were literally every office we went into across the country, even though I had a laptop, I had to log into a different computer system. I had passwords and IDs for virtually every office across the country. It was very hard to move mail from one system to, it was like a whole bunch of different islands. It was terrible. And so he just said, look, we've got a couple of problems. Our Salesforce automation tool, we've got technology issues in terms of getting onto the internet. We want to go to the mobile office environment, and I need you to figure out how to do it. What did I know? But I went in and figured it out. But here's the interesting thing. What it did for me as a sales professional is now I got in, I was basically in the chicken coop, because now I started getting invited to all these meetings with all these other CIOs. And so I could talk to these CIOs. Now I wasn't a salesperson, I was another chief information officer. And so I would meet, the CIOs of the banks, Canadian Tire, all the, big insurance companies, and they'd be, we'd be talking about business issues and stuff like that. And then I'd be going back to Xerox, and I'd be going back to the sales managers for each of those segments, and I go, hey, here's these guys I just met, here's their business issues, here's the guys you need to get in contact with. And let me tell you, these guys were just making a killing. They were out because they knew everything about those customers, and they could go out there and they knew how to position themselves. But I used to get calls all the time, software salespeople, hardware salespeople, services salespeople. And they'd call me up, oh, hi, Gary Jarosz, I understand you're the CIO, yep. And they start launching into a sales pitch, and they go on for like a minute or two. And then I'd stop them and I go, let me interrupt for a second. I go, I understand you're selling whatever software or whatever service it was, but what do you know about our organization? And they go, well, I know you're Xerox, you guys sell copiers, you sell these big printers, and you're number one in the industry and everything like that. And I go, yeah, but what do you know about our business as it relates to whatever you're trying to sell me? And they go, well, most companies would, see the value in what we're selling, and they could do this and they could do that. And I go, yeah, but what do you really know about our organization? And they would say, well, and I go, well, let me tell you something. I go, I'm the CIO of the corporation. I have responsibility for IT right across the country. But I said, do you know that we outsource our IT to, who did we outsource it to? I can't remember now. Remember that RAM thing? I'm starting to remember. It was like EDS. Oh yeah, EDS, that's who we outsourced our. So we had 1,500 IT professionals on contract with us from EDS. But basically, my organization was 7 people. There was me, I had a couple of managers and some admin staff, but then we had 1,500 people who worked for EDS. So I said, you're asking to sell me software. Guess what? All my software, all of it's being implemented and run and operated by EDS. So why are you calling me? And they'd go, well, and all of a sudden there'd be a lot of silence. So I used to tell these guys, you know what? You're probably young, and they gave you a list and they told you to go call. Let me give you a little bit of help. I go, before you call someone like me, do a little bit of research on the company, learn a little bit about the company, and then when you make a call, try to position how you're going to be able to help sell your technology that's going to help solve some of our problems. And I'll tell you, if you ever hear anybody give you that advice, that person was a salesperson in their life and that they went through kind of the travails that guy did. But the bottom line is that's what you got to do. You can't call on the first call and just say, hey, let me start telling you about my software. All we do when we approach customers, we just say, hey, we understand you're in this business. We understand a little bit about the industry. We're in the clean technology business. We think there's potential opportunities for us to do business. Can we come in and explore it? Yeah, sure. Why not? But don't come in and try and sell me something on the first call, because it's never going to work. And I used to get those calls over and over and over again. It used to drive me nuts, because just people, they're doing a disservice to their salespeople. And by the way, is it the salesperson's problem? No. Blame it on the sales manager, because if the sales manager is telling their guy just to go out and start cold calling and try to sell, it's the sales manager who needs the training, not the salesperson. But that goes on another point. So we talked about a lot of things so far. We're going to talk about a few more. But any questions from people just before we move on? Because we're kind of about halfway through. So,
Gary, when you land TTC, do you now go out and look at Montreal Transit, New York Transit, Boston Transit, because you've already got a case study that's working?
100%. So, and Bob's absolutely right. What we're doing is we've now said, okay, we now have a foothold in the Toronto Transit Commission. We've talked to people in their organization, both at the senior level and at the operational level. And we said, will you be reference for us if we approach the Montreal system, Washington, New York, Chicago, et cetera? 100%. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're now putting together similar kind of documents. We're going out doing research on those systems, finding out what's going on. I've got people working on it now as we speak. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go out and we're going to start referencing some of the work that we did at the TTC and some of the successes that we had and how it can impact those organizations. Because let me tell you, if the TTC is struggling with it, and they're considered the #1 public transit organization in North America, every other transit organization that has subways is having the same issue. Any other questions? Don't be shy. Don't make it all a one way for me. How much longer do I have, Teresa?
10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay. So let me move on to my next slide, which is the value one. So again, you think about the way you buy things just in your own personal life, right? I mean, you look at products, whether it's on the internet, you go to the mall, whatever the case may be, look in catalogs if there are any anymore. And you look at products and you can see who the maker is, what the quality is, what the price is, and you do a value equation. That's exactly how your customers are buying your product, your service, or your technology. They're going to use the same criteria that you use when you buy things for yourself. So if you think of it on that basis, all you have to think about every day when you go in is to that customer or that prospect is, am I positioning myself as I'm selling a product and therefore all they care about is what the price or what the cost is? Or am I in there adding value to their organization, trying to help out their business, and will that position me to sell my product, maybe at a premium? We look at the way we sell. We are not the low price product out in the marketplace. When I worked for IBM wasn't the lowest price product. When I looked at Xerox, they were not the lowest price product. So I'm always looking at selling at a premium. But if you can position the value of it, you can sell your product for as much as you want. It's all the value equation to the customer. We regularly have these conversations, should we be at 30 points of margin? Should we be at 50 points of margins? Or should we be at 70 points of margins? Let me tell you something. 70 points of margin is crazy. Most organizations work on 15, 20 points of gross margin. Most of the businesses I've ever worked in, they're never less than 50% gross margin. And the reason why is because we're always selling value to the customer. So if you want to grow your business, sales is one thing, profitability is another. Like working in an organization that has millions and trillions of dollars of sales but isn't making any profit, as an executive, that's not a great thing. I want to be a lot of sales revenue. I want to be very profitable. And the only way you're going to sell that profit is you got to sell higher margin. The only way you're going to sell higher margin is you got to have value, or you got to position value for your customer with the products and services that you're putting out there. So a couple things I would share with you then, just in closing as we kind of come down to the end of it, is think about sales career as a learning career and look at every interaction as an opportunity to learn. Business cards, people hardly use business cards a lot these days, but I'll tell you, I go through 1,000 of these a year. It's the cheapest advertising you'll ever have. And by the way, when I give someone my card, guess what they ask me? Oh, what's Global Missions do? So guess what? I'm immediately given the opportunity to give a sales pitch. And my sales pitch, and many of you have heard it, it's like 15, 20 seconds, but in a very short period of time, you know exactly what business I'm in. I give these away all the time. And I also use networking like crazy. We said we were going to talk about networking, and that's what's also going to be critical to you in terms of your own success in your sales career. Never burn any bridges. Always, like whether you like a person, like what they say, like the way they operate, whatever the case may be, you may not like it, always be cordial. Keep people on the friendly side. Keep them in your network. Keep contact with people because I can tell you, virtually every business, and I was surprised there was only one person here who'd been to Xerox training, but virtually every crowd I go into, I find an ex-IBM or I find an ex-Xerox person, I find someone that I've worked with or someone who worked with someone I knew who worked with, and I'm telling you, networking is critical. Whether it's in sales, trying to figure out how to get into an organization, whether it's in, I just lost my job because we downsized and I'm looking for a new job. That story about, 90% of the jobs are filled through, word of mouth versus through agencies, 100% correct. But you can use your network to get to the right people in organizations. So people that I'm on LinkedIn. If you look at my contact database, there's probably 3,000 people in it. Many of them I haven't talked to in years, but I'll tell you, when I see a company, I think back in my career, I go back to my notes and I go, that person worked for that company. I call them up and I ask for help because you know what? Everybody loves to help. If I call you and say, hey Sherry, I need some help or guidance from you. Could you spend a couple minutes with me? Or could, I send you an email, hey, I'm looking for some help. Guaranteed Sherry's going to return my email or my call because people generally like to feel needed. So when you say I need your help, people love that. So use that. I call people all the time. I got colleagues and family that go, are you kidding? You haven't talked to that guy in 15 years and you're going to call that guy or that lady? And I go, yeah, absolutely. They'll remember who I am and all I'm asking is for a little bit of help. But if they can get me into an organization through my network into the right person so I can start adding value immediately, major, major difference. Huge time saver. What's our only non-renewable resource? Time. That's the only non-renewable resource we have. So anything you can do to reduce time is going to increase your your rate of success in sales. So with that, I'm going to draw to a close. Any last questions just before we wrap up?
Yes, Gary, and I appreciate your candor and the information. It's been really interesting. I'm just wondering kind of two things. Could you recommend a book or a resource that you found impactful that might help other people improve their sales ability? And I'm just wondering, sales can be kind of a bit of a grind. You get a lot of no's before you get yeses. How do you stay motivated to kind of keep going at it?
You just brought a great point. And again, this is something that you got to think about as you go through your sales career and how you look at things. So typical sales guy goes out, no. Jesus starts getting really depressed. I remember talking to a guy, and I can't remember what company it was, a great sales guy. And someone said to him, yeah, like how do you keep motivated, with all these no's? And he goes, well, he says, my close rate, is basically 1 in 10. So every no I get, I know I'm one closer to a close. Think about it, right? I mean, every no means I'm one closer to a sale. So it's how you approach that no. Is no bad or is no bringing me to my future success? So that's one way to think you're motivated. In terms of, a book or guidance, I mean, obviously 7 Habits of Effective People is phenomenal. But, in terms of sales and going along the methodology that I talked to, there's an organization based in the US called Impacts Inc., I think it's called. Anyway, the principals there are Dan Kosh and Mark Shanka. And a lot of the stuff that I learned in my career is through learning, interacting with different people. But a lot of the basis of it was really solidified through their sales implementation, their methodology. So they were the company that actually came to Xerox, sold their sales training, and then did the implementation. So when I went out as a young kid with my bag, eager to make sales, it was their consultants who came out with me to the customer site, guided me through the process, and showed me how to use it. So they have, actually they have a book, it's called Beyond Selling Value or something along those lines. I'll get it for you, and I'll give it to Frank and Teresa, and then they can communicate it around. Beyond Selling Value, I think that's what the name of the book is. But it's by Impacts Corporation, and it's very basic, but it all talks about information. How do you learn about the customer? How do you do the research? How do you get that information together? And then how do you then present that back to the customer to position yourself as valuable? Any other questions? Yes?
You mentioned that you run larger sales teams. How do you find the people that fit with what you're selling for? Is there certain criteria that you look for in salespeople? Are there things here that people can utilize as skills that you think are 100% need this in order to be great at sales? Like, what are those techniques that you find to hire?
I'll tell you one thing that I learned in business is trust your gut, because 9 times out of 10, how many people here have said, my gut says this, and then didn't follow it and regretted it? Yeah, exactly. Trust your gut. I mean, I interviewed, hired, fired, and trained many, many salespeople over my professional career. What I found was, in an interview, it's basically a sales call. Think about it. So when we used to interview people to hire them, we looked at that interview as a sales call. And so how they conducted themselves in that interview really kind of set the standard for how we thought they were going to be selling. But the bottom line is, are there specific skills that are critical to make people successful? No. I'll tell you, I don't know that there is anyone that I could say, because we would hire guys who were, some of the best salespeople I remember at Xerox were phys ed majors, like literally. And so, people would say, well, does that mean you like to hire people who have a sports orientation? Because, their team, they're used to teams, they're used to competing, they're used to winning, they don't like losing. Yeah, that was a good model. But, what about people who didn't come out of sports? We had some phenomenal salespeople who came out of administrative services. So it's really a combination, or that collection of skills. What's their experience? What are their base criteria? So if you're, hiring people right out of school, you're looking for basic core things. Are they a good listener? Do they ask right questions? Are they taking notes? Do they look like they're attentive? But when you're hiring professional salespeople, remember, they're professional salespeople, so they're going to sell you on why they think they're the best person for that job, and you got to be able to carve through that. Don't ever hire someone without doing reference checks, because I know people have and not a good thing to do. But so I know I'm skating around it, because I don't want to say there's like 3 real key things, because people go through different renditions in their careers too as they develop sales. So you're selling a complex product, you're selling an easy product. They each require different kind of core skills and soft skills. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do you coach sales?
Pardon me?
Do you coach sales?
You're always coaching sales, all the time. Whether it's my own kids, whether it's my wife, whether it's people in our office, all the time. And I can tell you one thing, it doesn't matter what job you're in, you're always selling, okay? One of the things that made Xerox great was every executive from the president on down sold. Like, I can remember going on sales calls with their chief legal counsel. Like, he's selling, but let me tell you, the guy was a great salesperson. So yeah, I do coach, but I'm coaching all the time. Like, we have salespeople in our organization, I see them doing things, I give them coaching hints all the time. But I ask them questions. That's part of my coaching style, is I ask questions and then I tell them really kind of what they should be doing as opposed to not doing. Anybody else? Okay, if there isn't any more questions, I hope you got a little bit of value out of my discussion here today with you. And if any of you ever want to come back and ask me any questions, Frank has my contact info, so does Teresa. So by any means, shoot me an email and I'll get back to you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Gary. So one of the key points I took away is that we should always sell on value, because if we're selling on price, it's a race to the bottom. And it doesn't help any of us, right? So thank you so much for being here, everybody, today. Frank, I'm just going to invite him up. He has a few things to tell you about our upcoming speakers that we're going to have. There's still lots of coffee. Please network, meet some people that you don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much again, Gary. Wow. So I just want to touch on what you mentioned about the culture of sharing and asking people to help you. This is what this series has actually been about. We haven't had anybody up here that the last slide has said, hey, you got to hire me to help you sell. Even Gary's saying, hey, I can help you. If you want to give me a shout, I can talk to you. And that's what I've been, excuse me, that's what I've been finding with trying to get the speakers out here. So we have an amazing lineup for 2018. As a matter of fact, one of them is in-house today, Pavel. Pavel is a lawyer. We're not going to hold that against him.
Thank you.
But what Pavel teaches is negotiation at Osgood Hall. And if you're in sales, you know that you're going to have to be able to negotiate when you're in sales. So in April, Pavel is going to be one of our speakers. So thank you very much, Pavel. February, we have a lady named Louisa Jewell. Louisa is actually a professional author, speaker, and she travels all over North America. And she usually charges, but you guys remember Caesar? Caesar introduced me. I asked her if she could do the session. And her talk in February 20th, which is our next one, is all about wiring your brain for success and having people sell more, as opposed to that grouch.
So going back to what I was saying about networks, I worked with Louisa Jewell at IBM.
Okay, what a small world. Yes,
and her husband, I might add.
I don't know her husband. And one of the things that you also said is trust your gut feeling. That's how I got married, and I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I did. So we also have one of the Ignite winners. Her name is Emma Harris, who, if some of you know, young entrepreneur, started a business of Healthy Pets, which is virtual reality with doctors as opposed to always running. She's agreed to do it. So I guess my message is, this is a culture of sharing, and if you just ask people, as you mentioned earlier on, Gary, people really want to help you, and certainly I try to live up to that myself, along with BACD, Spark Center, and all the good people that I know. So please, come on out. Our next one is February the 20th, and we're just going to be funding up the entire 9 series over the next couple of days, and then we'll publish those and all the dates as well, okay? So thank you very much for coming out, Gary. Thank you so much, and I'm so happy you know Louisa. So thanks again, and have a wonderful day, okay?